This is K.M. Weiland, and you are listening to the 221st episode of the Helping Writers Become Authors podcast. This year, November is becoming a bit of a take some time and breathe month. After the mad rush of the earlier part of this year with the release of Structuring Your Novel, the redesigns of both my websites, My Sister's Wedding, the completion of my latest work in progress Storming, among half a jillion other things, I'm making use of this downtime between novels to keep up with email and blogging responsibilities, solidify some plans for the next year, including the release of the annotated Jane Eyre and the start of a new work in progress. Really, that's enough in itself to keep me busy, if perhaps not as busy as all you nanoers. When two of your characters want the same thing. The latest post in the video series on my blog talks about how shared goals can either make allies or enemies of your characters. To watch it, visit my website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. New videos are posted every Wednesday. And now, I hope you enjoyed this week's podcast entitled 7 Ways to Decide Which Story Idea You Should Write Next. The most important decision a writer will ever make is which story to write. Sometimes that will be an easy decision. The right story will be staring us in the face, but sometimes the choices can be overwhelming. If you're like me, then you probably have enough story ideas to last you the rest of your life. There they stand, all in a sparkling row, each of them clamoring for your attention, each of them enticing in their possibilities. It's darn tough to pick just one when really we want to write all of them. So how do you choose? After finishing my diesel punk work in progress Storming earlier this year, I'm currently in that resting place between stories, and I'm doing my best to figure out which of my ideas is the right one to start on next. I had intended my next book to be a modern-day time travel suspense story. Think The Bourne Identity meets The Time Traveler's Wife. But I have another idea about a historical superhero, think Spider-Man meets Jane Austen, that is also clamoring for my attention. Both stories interest me, obviously, but which one is the right one for me to write at this time in my life? Which am I most likely to enjoy writing right now? Which will end up becoming the better book? This is never a decision for any of us to make lightly. Whatever story we choose is one we're going to be spending the next couple of years with. If we choose the wrong story, we could end up wasting time and expending untold frustration on the project. But if we choose the right story, we'll be embarking on an exciting and fulfilling journey that will help us grow as writers and hopefully produce a book we can share with others. Following are the 7 factors I considered in deciding which of my story ideas to write next. 1. Look beyond the premise. If your story doesn't have a great premise, you shouldn't be writing it. But a great premise by itself, a great story doth not make. Where do you see this premise leading you? What kind of characters will populate this story? What will they be seeking? Who will be opposing them? What kind of world will they be living in? 2. Realize loving parts of a story isn't enough. Let's say you have an idea for a story set in Rio de Janeiro in the 19th century about 2 immigrants on the run. You love the setting and the interaction between the 2 characters, but frankly, the suspense angle or the reason they're on the run in the first place simply doesn't interest you too much. Before you commit to a story, you need to love everything about it. Think through the ramifications of your premise. Are you going to have fun and be able to maintain interest throughout all its logical progressions? Or will you grow bored with some aspects? If you find the latter to be true, then this may not be a story you're going to want to live with for months on end. 3. Make your own head explode. If you're going to have any chance of blowing your readers' minds, then first you have to blow your own. A story can be a great idea in itself, but if it doesn't thrill you down to your toenails, then you need to question whether you're going to have enough passion to see it through. Ask yourself, is this a story you were meant to write? Is this a story you can't not write? If the answer to either is no, then you might want to rethink. 4. Look for characters with strong voices and interaction. Not every seemingly great story idea comes complete with the rest of the trappings necessary to make a great book. Think about your characters. Are they already so vibrant in your head that you can sense they'll have unique and powerful voices on the page? Will they be memorable and definitive? Will they interact with each other in meaningful and important ways? A great premise that lacks great characters is going nowhere fast. 5. Look for a bigger story. Most of my story ideas start out with the interaction between two characters, but by itself, that's not enough to fill a whole book. Consider your ideas. Can you sense the weight of a bigger story beneath the surface? What are the stakes? Who else will these characters end up affecting through their interaction with each other? If you can't at least sense the possibility for greater depth, then the idea may not have enough strength to carry itself. 6. Figure out what kind of story it will be. You figured out your premise and your characters. So far, so good. But do you know what type of story you want this to be? Don't sit down to write a story without knowing what you're trying to create. When I started writing Storming, I knew exactly what I wanted it to be, a fun summer blockbuster sort of story. My understanding of the story's tone helped me craft it from start to finish into a cohesive whole. If you lack that understanding of your story, you won't be able to create the cohesion and focus you want it to have. 7. Listen to your gut. This part is also called Don't Be OCD. I admit it, I like to do things in order, including story ideas. But just because a story idea is the next one in line doesn't necessarily mean it's the right one to be writing at this time. Get in touch with your instincts. Which story feels right? And more importantly, which ones don't feel right? Margaret Atwood wisely said, "You know when you're not ready." You may be wrong about being ready, but you're rarely wrong about being not ready. No matter how much consideration we invest in choosing our next writing project, we won't always be able to predict which stories will be successful for us and which won't. But by considering these 7 factors, we can at least eliminate some of the ideas that definitely aren't ready to be written. As for me, although I haven't made a final call yet, I'm definitely leaning toward the notion that my historical superhero story may be the right one for me to be spending time with for the next couple years of my life. Either way, you'll be seeing an update to my currently writing page soon. Thank you for listening to the Wordplay Podcast. To read a transcript of this episode, you can visit my website at helpingwritersbecomeauthors.com. And be sure to check back again next week.